This is a confusing game. The Seahawks and the 49ers, a lot of money up for grabs, but what do we do here? I've spent about 5 hours diving into this slate. Let's discuss what I found. And we could start with the $8,800 receiver, Brandon Ayuk, who's in a very interesting price range for this third-year receiver. You see, Ayuk all season quietly has been leading this team in snaps. 49 snaps here, led all the receivers by far. Now, what this led to is just 3 targets, but he found the end zone. But his 3 targets when the team is only throwing 20 times is actually decent, a 15% target share. Now, expect him to be more involved with Deebo Samuel going to miss this game, but with Brock Purdy at QB, they probably only throw 25 times. You're hoping for a 5 to 6 target game. So Ayuk can definitely get you there. It's just going to be much more difficult, and there's probably other situations where it's easier for players on the slate to pay off for you. And if you're indeed curious, yes, these two teams have faced each other before, and Ayuk in week 2 went for 5 catches on 8 targets, 63 yards. If he earned 8 targets in this game, I would probably be rather surprised it would be pushing a 30+% target share. So that's a receiver on the San Francisco side of the ball. Now we go to Seattle, where there's a $6,400 wide receiver, Marquise Goodwin. And he just had one of his best games, his second best game of the season. He ends up getting 6 targets, 95 yards. He finds the end zone to push him over 20 points in this one. And normally I wouldn't think anything of this. Maybe it's just a blimp. He spikes up like he did in week 7 when he scored 23 points, but his usage actually changed. You see, these last few weeks, he was only playing 46 and 34% of the snaps, and he was healthy. There wasn't anything wrong with him. But this week, he played 75% as they needed to pass more. Now, at the end of the day, this is still a brutal matchup versus a top 5 secondary, one in which he didn't put up a single point in week 2, and he's the third option in the passing game. So I'm hesitant here at an increasing price point. So that's an expensive receiver, a mid-range receiver, both maybe slightly overpriced. Now we go to a cheap receiver at $3,600. Juwan Jennings is going to be the wide receiver 2 this week for San Francisco without Deebo Samuel. But, and this is a big old booty, we must keep in mind Ayuk is obviously still there. Kittle is there, and CMC, Christian McCaffrey, is there. So he's still the 4th option in this passing attack for a team that wants to be run first. Now with that in mind, Juwan Jennings has fantastic size. He's 6'3", he's 215 pounds. He is a red zone weapon for this team, the former 2020 7th round pick. And last week, he was actually second on the team with 13 routes run, second only behind Brandon Ayuk, so that's why I'm going to expect him to operate as a big slot receiver, operate on the outside in 2 wide receiver sets, so he's going to see some more usage at just $3,600. He's primarily used on these deep crossers over the middle of the field and in the red zone, but again, he's the 4th option for Brock Purdy on a team that's probably going to throw 25 times, so don't get all jumping up and down, but at $3,600 definitely in play. And what he allows you to do is pay up for guys like DK Metcalf at $10,000, who just continues to dominate. 10 more targets this past week, 5 catches, finds the end zone again. He now has 18 points. He's crossed 13 fantasy points in 6 straight games. He's crossed 8 targets or more in 4 straight games. Now in week 2 against this same secondary, he only posted 7.5 fantasy points, a day where most of the offense struggled, but on a 1-game slate against this team, we cannot count out DK Metcalf because this dude's usage is elite. I mean, in terms of cheat code targets, he's a top 5 receiver this year in cheat code targets, your red zone and your deep targets, those targets that easily allow you to have an insane ceiling but a great floor. He's 3rd in red zone targets, and he's seen 16 deep targets this year. This dude, his size, speed, specimen, needs to be in play, needs to be a priority play. And another player that might allow you to go get to him is a guy who's just $1,000 this week. And that's Ray McCloud III, who's $1,200, the former Pittsburgh Steeler, who's actually 2nd on the team last week in snaps. Now, Juwan Jennings was 2nd in routes, so Ray McCloud was out there more just kind of being used as a distraction and motion and really just to block. But the interesting thing with McCloud, when he was with the Steelers, he was basically just used underneath, never went downfield, but so far this season, 4 of his 18 targets, that's 22%, are deep targets. He's seen a red zone target, so he's being used a lot more in this offense. Last week, his 44% of the snaps, 3 carries, and a target. So he's getting utilized at $1,200, being schemed plays when you're a wide receiver getting carries. That's good news at this price point. Now, the potential bad news is that he's not like a special talent. As you can see right here, his workout metrics, none of them are basically above average. Most of them are below average. Anything below 50 or at 50 is average or below here for his speed, his burst, his agility, his catch radius. None of it is great. And he wasn't any type of great producer or even average producer in college. He's just kind of a guy who's out there and works in this offense. I expect him to split the wide receiver 3 role with the rookie, Danny Gray. So that's a lot of wide receiver chatter. Now let's talk about the $4,400 tight end in Noah Fant, who last week he saw his usage drop. You see the tight end snaps are on the screen right now. He played 30 snaps, 21 for Disley and 17 for Colby Parkinson. These 30 snaps are only 56% of the total snaps. Now this is a dude who just played 71% of the snaps last year, is playing over 60% of the snaps on the season, so slightly lower usage here for a player who's not all that involved anyways, just 1 target last last week. In this three-headed dirty backfield, he needs to score a touchdown, but he only has 7 red zone targets on the year. It's not that great for Noah Fant here, a player who, when he's not scoring a touchdown, has failed to basically top 6 fantasy points in most of his games. Now, this slate has a solid amount of cheap options because Debo's out. Juwan Jennings, we talked about, Ray McLeod, and then there's Danny Gray at just $200, who is indeed a rookie, and he has absolute elite speed. We're talking top 2% 40 of all time, top 7% speed of all time, and some pretty average to solid burst out of him. So he's actually a weapon. He has a skill set that a guy like Ray McLeod does not. And now last week, Danny Gray saw his first catch, his first career NFL catch, 1 catch for 10 yards. He now has 7 targets on the season, so you should expect some more usage out of Danny Gray. Last week, he saw 13 snaps, ran 3 routes, but this was with Deebo Samuel playing more than 50% of the game. If we can get somewhere where Danny Gray is running 10 routes, playing 20 snaps at just $200, well, you can be damn sure that Kyle Shanahan's going to probably and most likely scheme up at least 1 deep target for the guy, and that alone can pay off. He's in play. And now we head back up top because we have some of these punt value options, and I look at Tyler Lockett, who right now is 10,200. He's more than DK Metcalf, but is this justified? Well, Lockett last week, yet again, finding the end zone. He goes for 17 points, 9 more targets. He's now scored in 6 straight games, and he now, because of that, has 13 or more points in 6 straight games. And a lot of his success this year is the way they're using him. In the past, he's been used in the slot 50+% of the times. This year, just 24% of the time out of the slot. That means he's being targeted much more downfield on the outside, and that's why he sees 17 deep targets, top 15 in the league. He has a lot more upside with Geno Smith now. And in week 2, Lockett was basically the only player on this entire team to find success. 11 targets, over 100 yards, 9 catches, puts up over 20 fantasy points. Now, again, that's a 1-game sample. We don't want to take too much from it, but he does have a mismatch here, especially that 25% of the time when he does move into the slot. Now, if I'm choosing a Seattle wide receiver here, I'm personally choosing DK Metcalf, the 235-pound, top 1% speed, size specimen of all time, who's actually cheaper here. And if I'm choosing a San Francisco pass catcher, it's $8,000 George Kittle, who in my opinion is way too cheap. He just saw a 25% target share last week, 5 out of a potential 20 targets from Brock Purdy. Now, as you can see here, it didn't lead to much, just 4 catches for 28 yards, under 7 fantasy points. He has not topped 7 points in his last 5 games, just 3 games of 15+ points this year. And there's no data sample on him versus Seattle this year because he missed week 2. So all of this in general, and his price point still being high, is going to lead to him being lower owned, and I like it. Because without Deebo Samuel in a beneficial matchup, don't you think the young quarterback is going to continue to target George Kittle? And last week, when the game was a blowout and Brock Purdy only threw 21 times, maybe he throws 30+ times this week. You're looking at a potential 7 to 10 target game. And speaking of Brock Purdy, at $9,600, he's also a solid play anytime a quarterback is under 10 grand, especially when they're going to be put in an efficient offense with Kyle Shanahan. It looks nice. Now, in his first start, he goes for 21.7 fantasy points, 3 total targets. Again, he only has 185 yards, but he's only throwing 21 times. His 8.8 yards per attempt was elite, one of the best in-game efficient performances this season. And now look, he doesn't have a strong arm. He's accurate, yes, and he's a good decision maker, and he can process the play. But all of this is because he has a good head coach with good players. Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, all of these dudes are elite after the catch, which makes the quarterback find some easy yards. I mean, these are Brock Purdy's college numbers. You're seeing a lot of accuracy, above 66% completion, 70% his final year, and yards per attempt is his efficiency. So yeah, he fits very well plug and play into this offense. And at this price point, I like him more than Geno. Which, speaking of Geno, at $10,600, it doesn't mean that he's necessarily a bad play here. Last week, he had a bad real-life game, but he still puts up 22 fantasy points, finds the end zone 3 times, adds some rushing yards as well, which is nice to see. But this week, he's going to face that 49ers top 5 secondary that in week 2 ended up leading him to just 7 points. He actually completed 80% of his passes in this game, but doesn't find the end zone. Since then, though, he's looked a lot better. He's been fantastic, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And we have to keep that in mind. Yeah, the matchup is still tough, but the intangibles, his confidence, his play caller's confidence in him to make those throws downfield, his wide receiver's confidence in him as well, all of that has increased since week 2. So I do think you're going to get a lower own, which makes him a better DFS play here out of Geno Smith. Now, I actually placed a prize picks on this. I took Geno Smith under 240.5 passing yards. I have him in the 220s, and Brock Purdy over 200. I have him as well in the 220s. Again, I took these 2 props on prizepicks.com, which if you're not already a member, you can check it out. It's linked down below. You'll get a free bet up to $100. And you can take basically any single player you want for this game, for any game on Saturday slate. Yes, there's Saturday games. We'll have a video. There's Sunday games. Or you could even go into different sports where there's NBA, as you can see right here. They have esports. They have soccer. They have every single thing you could want. Check it out. Linked down below. And when you use that code SAL22, that's That's SAL22. You'll get a free bet matched up to $100. So use it or lose it. Check it out right now with the link in the description. And we can finish up the guys above 8K with McCaffrey, who I'm shocked he's not above $12,000. So yes, he's way too cheap here in my opinion as a favorite. He's been a top 2 running back the last few weeks. Last week putting up over 150 yards on just 16 touches. He's going to face a bottom 10 Seahawks tackling unit without Deebo Samuel. He's already an elite versatile player who's clearly schemed into this offense. And now we're going to get a guy last week who put up 30 points just catching the ball 2 times. He's probably going to be involved a lot more in the passing game here. Yes, you want to play Christian McCaffrey. It goes without saying. But what about the Seattle side where there's a bunch of running backs to discuss because of their injuries? I mean, you can see them all here in the 7 and 6K range. Kenneth Walker, Travis Homer, and DJ Dallas. Now, last week, despite reports from Adam Schefter saying Tony Jones was going to see all the snaps, Jones only seeing 5 of 54 snaps, it was Travis Homer who went out there and saw an elite role, 91% of the snaps. Now, it led to 9 carries, 3 targets, but he only had 5 fantasy points in this game. He saw elite usage, but it did not end up in production, only 34 yards on 11 touches. Look, this was just a bad game. He's a strong athlete and a solid offense, albeit a difficult matchup here. But of course, it goes without saying we have to track the status. So far on Monday is an estimated injury report. It's not a real report. They say what would have happened if they went to practice. DJ Dallas would not have practiced and Kenneth Walker would be limited. So your simple formula here is if those guys miss again, yeah, fire up Homer, who's at a nice price point. If those guys are playing, I don't want anybody. If it's DJ Dallas who ends up playing, it's going to be a split backfield. If it's Kenneth Walker, he'll control the entire backfield, probably on a bum ankle and a tough matchup. Now, if this does come down to a game time decision and Kenneth Walker actually ends up playing, his ownership will likely be lower. That's the one spot here where I will play Kenneth Walker. A last minute in for him makes him a nice leverage play in GPPs. But regardless of who sees the most work here, they still face San Francisco, who allows the least rushing yards this year, just 752, almost 100 less than the next closest teams. They are fantastic against the run. It's a tough spot. And we can close out the running back talk with the backup running back from the 49ers, Jordan Mason, who's $4,800. Is this price point justifiable? Well, last week you saw 19 snaps. That was a season high 30% of the snaps, and it led to 11 touches for over 50 yards. He's been averaging nearly 6 yards per touch these last 2 games as the primary backup. I mean, that is fantastic usage. The problem was he saw more usage last week because the game was a blowout and they pulled Christian McCaffrey. You see, if he was a $2,000 player, it'd actually have some interest here, but at nearly $5,000, you're probably going to get 6 touches for, at best, 30 yards in this game. It's tough to get there. We've talked about some values, but are there any others? At 2,400, you have Will Disley, who's an interesting play. He earned 3 targets on 11 routes last week, and now this column right here is his receptions. He's seen 2 or more receptions at this point in 7 straight games. I mean, I can keep scrolling until we get back basically 2 months ago. So that gives you a little bit of upside there, but I still prefer the wide receivers in this range, and Danny Gray and Jawan Jennings and Ray McLeod. The other potential values down here are going to be guys like Colby Parkinson, the tight end 3 on Seattle. Last week, he only ended up running 10 routes, so that's not all that interesting. Tyler Kroft only ran 2 routes last week, the backup tight end behind Kittle in San Francisco. And then there's Laquan Treadwell, the wide receiver 4 for Seattle, all the way at the bottom of your screen, but he only ran 2 routes on 4 snaps last week. It's not all that appealing. The values are pretty clear in those San Francisco wide receivers, and then of course the kickers and defenses. I'll take some of those San Francisco wide receivers, especially Jawan Jennings with some touchdown upside, but the kickers and defenses are some of, if not the best, though all 4 of them plays on the slate to get you up to the top end. Now, if you want to see exactly who the best plays on the slate are, the best leverages, the lowest owned with the most upside, that's exactly how you win in DFS and try and potentially win hundreds of thousands of dollars and stop losing. You can check out the DFS blueprint link down below. You'll get access to all the tools to improve your chances of winning in NFL, everything you see right here, especially for this showdown slate, but also for every other sport that you possibly want to play, NBA, UFC, MLB when that's in season, so on and so forth. So to join the thousands of other people using it right now, you can check out the link in the description to the DFS blueprint. Now, best of luck on this slate, and I'll see you beautiful people all in the next video. Saturday football this week, baby.